Yeah, today we are going to see about compounds. So what is meant by compounds? Compound is defined as a pure substance made up of two or more elements chemically combined in a fixed motions by mass. Example, carbon dioxide and water. So there are types of compounds. First, covalent compounds, ionic compounds and metallic compounds. Today we are going to see about more details about ionic compounds. Moving on to the next pamphlets. So what is ionic compounds? The compound which have bonds formed by loss and gain of electrons are called ionic compounds or electrovalent compound, and the bond formed is known as ionic bond or electrovalent bond. How these bonds are formed? Ionic bonds by the metals react with the non-metals to form an ionic compound. For example, sodium is a metal and the chlorine is a non-metal to form a sodium chloride. Sodium, the atomic number is 11 and the chlorine they have 17. So next, how these ionic compounds or form will be seeing in the next pamphlet. It's quite interesting about how the formation of the bonding were happening. So let me go for the closure. So sodium, we know that we have an 11 atomic number. So the outermost shell, the electrons, they have 1 electrons, and the chlorine, the atomic number is 17. Obviously they will be having 7 electrons in their outermost shell. 2, 4, 6 and 7. So sodium they have 1 and the chlorine they have 7. So sodium plus chloride, they will form a sodium chloride, an ionic compound. So what is happening here? The sodium will give electrons to chlorine to form an sodium chloride. So in sodium there will be completely 1 electrons will be given to the chlorine. So sodium is called cations. They have positive charge, and the chlorine they are called anions. They will be having negative charge. So this is the formation of the ionic bonds. Some other examples like magnesium plus chlorine, they will form magnesium chloride, and zinc plus chlorine, they will form zinc chloride. So the chlorine is converted into chloride because of the anions. They are getting 1 electrons to form sodium chloride. Moving on to the next slide or next pamphlets, we have to know about the properties of ionic compounds. What these ionic compounds they will be having in properties? Ionic compounds have high boiling point and melting point. You had come across the terms of boiling and melting point, and these compounds are brittle and break into small pieces easily. That means it is easily breakable. Next, ionic compounds do not conduct electricity in solid state, but they do conduct in the molten state. That means during the solid state they will not pass the current, but in the aqueous or in the molten state they used to pass the current. So they are a good conductor of electricity also. Next, moving on to the next property, they are usually dissolved in water and insoluble in solvents like oil, petrol and kerosene, etc. Yes, they are usually, these ionic compounds can easily dissolve in the water. So these are the properties of ionic compounds. First, let me go for the first point is in high boiling point and melting point. And second one is the physical nature. It's a brittle and break into pieces. And the electric conductivity, they don't conduct in solid state, but in the aqueous or in the molten state, obviously they will conduct the electricity. And the solubility nature, they will dissolve in water and they are insoluble in solvents like oil, petroleum and kerosene, etc. So in the board exam they will be asking what are the properties of ionic compounds also. So like this you can make a cut short of the points and you can memorize easily. Next, moving on to a short recap of what is the metals versus non-metals. Obviously, we will be knowing about the physical properties of metals and non-metals. Moving on to the chemical properties, it's a main role plays in the chemical properties. All the metals react with an oxygen to form metal oxides, but all the non-metals react with oxygen to form acidic or neutral oxide. They can lose electrons. Yes, we have seen sodium is a metal. It loses the electrons. They can easily gain the electrons. Whereas in non-metals, yes, in chlorine they have gain electrons. They form basic oxide, but they form acidic oxide. They are electropositive and they are electronegative. To recall, we have seen, so this is electropositive, that means it is giving one electron, and the chlorine, they are electronegative. Yes, they are getting the electrons, so they are called electronegative. Moving on to the next. What are about anions and cations? We'll be seeing a short recap of anions and cations. So, definition for anions. An anion is an atom or molecule which is negatively charged. That means they have more number of electrons than protons. Yes, we know that electrons are negatively charged and the protons are positively charged. So, they are negatively charged. But whereas in the cations is an atom or a molecule which is positively charged, more protons than electrons. That means it is proton is plus, so they are positively charged. And the charge, obviously, they are negative and they are positive. During the electrolysis, this anions will deposit in the anode region and the cations will deposit in the cathode region. And etymology, that means what is the meaning of anode? Anode means up, that means gaining up, and kata means down. It means that it's coming down, that means it is giving one electrons. Examples like chlorine and examples like sodium. So you will be knowing more about ionic compounds and a small recap of all the ionic compounds. First, we have seen about what is compounds and what is about ionic compounds, and we have seen about the formation of the compounds, and we have seen about the properties of the compounds, and last we have seen about metals and the difference, the metals versus non-metals. Thank you.